Well, sticks and stones, they might break my bones, and the enemy, it won't leave me alone. I'ma live my life happy and free. Sticks and stones, they may break my bones, but they'll never break me. Come on, devil, get inside my head. You won't change me 'cause I'm way too blessed. Send your warriors to do their best. You can't kill me 'cause I'm already dead. I said you can't kill me 'cause I'm already dead. Welcome back to Total Freedom Radio with Rena Lynn, show that's all about raising the bar of knowledge, healing hurting people, and spiritual warfare. We've got Chris Knight from the Copper Scroll Project back with us again today, and we are so excited. Chris, thank you for coming back again another week.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Let's just dig right in as a continuation of what we did last week. If you could have total freedom to dig the treasure up, what do you think would happen with the treasure, the temple implements, and the understanding of biblical truth for all people?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. What do you think will happen? Well, the the big thing, the purpose of the treasures is to bring in the time of mercy, and Jeremiah speaks of that these things will not come out until the gathering and the time of mercy, and when these the solemn things will be dedicated like they were during the time of Moses and the time of Solomon, which was the tabernacle and the temple dedication. So it's the big picture is just the bringing in of the millennial reign of Christ. That's what they're all about. It's about the gathering. Every time you the historical documents that surround that explain what the copper scroll is, because we have this copper scroll that Jim has figured out the locations, but nowhere in the copper scroll really do you get a lot of understanding of who wrote it or why. I think there's some names in there like Haggai and stuff, but all the documents that do give a historical reference to who wrote this all talk about the gathering, the time of gathering. When Yeshua came the first time, he looked at Jerusalem, he wept. And he said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, had you known the time of your visitation, I would have gathered you." And this is one of the arguments of the rabbis. He said, if he was the Messiah, why didn't he gather us? And he says, "Oh, you priest, you blind, you lead the blind, you shut up the kingdom to all those who try to enter." And so basically, the way I took that is he was saying, "Look, I can't finish my mission." He came to gather. Right? He's crying because he can't fulfill the gathering. And so the gathering had to be put off, even though it was prophesied this would happen. Obviously, Yeshua's heart was still to gather, and so we still have the other half of his ministry to complete. And so, I said, he couldn't finish what he started, so he's got to come back and finish it. So the gathering is all wrapped in the restoration of these items, and obviously the gathering is to enter into this transition of a closing of an age and entering into the age of peace and the 1,000-year reign, when Satan will be bound and no longer deceive the nations, and the knowledge of God will increase in the earth, which the byproduct is peace. Whenever the knowledge of God grows, peace comes with it. And so it's this hope and this restoration. Some people would struggle with the knowledge of these things because they don't have a good foundational understanding of what it means. If I were to share this with a Jew, he would understand it. If he's biblical literate, Jews, the temple is coming and the Messiah. If I say it with a Messianic person, they're going to understand it for the most part. But most Christians, they've been taught bad theology. There's a lot of stuff that's crept in. It's just caused ignorance in the church, and I was there once too. But with these things coming out, it's gonna create an awakening, and it's gonna challenge some theologies. It's going to shake the nations, because when Messiah comes back and these things are starting to be restored, one of the byproducts is the judgment of the nations and the shaking of the nations and the gathering of his people. This is one thing I share. I got back from Israel one time, and I was sharing with people about the Ark of the Covenant. And it said that the Ark of the Covenant is in exile. It's hidden. We don't know where it's at, or
Yeah.
we think we may know where it's at, but it's not in Israel. It's hidden. And I said, to me, that's a message, because what does the ark represent? It's mercy. It's the mercy seat. We go before the ark, the throne of God, to receive mercy. I said, so to me, that means mercy is in the nations. God's mercy is in the Gentiles. We're in the time of the Gentiles. And the ark being in the Gentiles, even though it's been there for a very long time, to me, it's symbolic that God's grace and God's mercy is working in the nations. But it's not, the grace and the mercy is not going to stay there forever. If the ark were to come out and become visible on the earth, and start heading back to Israel, then you can look at that as mercy is heading back to Israel, and it's leaving the nations. And so I don't know if I want to be in the nations when that left. Joshua 3:3 talks about the second Passover. Some people are familiar. There's two Passovers. You can celebrate one, or you can celebrate the second one a month later, but that's a type and shadow of two Exodus. But there's a greater Exodus coming to the first one. And when they do the second Passover at the Jordan, the water splits, and it says the priest pick up the ark, and it says, when you see the priest bearing the ark, get up from your place and go after it. And to me, that's a type and shadow of the future restoration. If these things come out and everything starts going back to the temple, well, that's where grace and mercy is headed. And if we're alive and stuff, we may want to start heading that way too. So it'll be tribulation times. I mean, whenever there's breakthrough, whenever there's deliverance, there's always tribulation first, and then comes the God's grace and God's mercy and God's restoration after. So it's hope. The whole concept of the Valley of Achor is the door of hope. The place where these things are located are in what's called the ruins in the Valley of Achor. It's the first line on the copper scroll. And where we see that is in Hosea. It says, in the Valley of Achor is a door of hope. And it's talking about the same time frame as Ezekiel 37 and the future gathering and the future restoration of Israel, when his tabernacle and his temple and David and all that will be established again in the future. So there's this restoration coming, and we're not quite there yet, because to me, one of the biggest signs is the end of the age of the Gentiles. The fullness of the gospel going to the Gentiles is not done. And one of the places in Revelations where we see the ark is right before the seventh trumpet blows, or right after the seventh trumpet blows. It says the temple opens up, and then you see the ark. And I think that's a spiritual version of probably what's happening on earth. Maybe Revelations 10:7 says, right before the seventh trumpet blows, the mystery will be complete. And so when you go in there and you read all that, it says, now has come the kingdom of our God and his Messiah, and he's begun to reign, right? So, and then we see the ark showing up. So the ark and all these things coming out could be intimately tied to the end of the age of the Gentiles coming to the close. And then we're entering into the close of the fullness of the Gentiles as we start to transition into the kingdom, the gathering, and the bringing in of peace.
I love that. Did you ever decide or find who actually wrote the Copper Scroll? And if so, how did you determine that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because looking at the Copper Scroll itself and the Dead Sea Scrolls, you really don't get much context on where did this come from. And we do find a number of historical documents. One's called a Mech Hamelech, written by Rabbi Naphtali Hertz in the 1600s. We have Second Maccabees that talks about this. We have Baruch, and these all can be grounded or rooted back into Scripture and Jeremiah and the time of the Babylonian invasion. And it's interesting because the one place where we find people writing these treasures on a copper plate is in the book of Mech Hamelech, which means Valley of the Kings. And it's really in the last chapter of this book. The whole book is not about this, but the rabbi had found, published some fragments that were taken out of a Geniza in a synagogue in Egypt, Cairo, Egypt, called the Ezra Synagogue. A Geniza, just I think, is Hebrew for storeroom. And in the Jewish culture, they don't believe in destroying any documents or paper that has the name Yod Hey Vav Hey on it. So they'll stick it in a basement or in an
Right,
attic.
right.
And he had found a bunch of fragments and published them and made it his last chapter. And the last chapter is called Treaty of the Vessels. And it tells the story of Shemar HaLevi, Zechariah, the prophet Haggai, and a few other people, and they're fleeing Babylon. The invasion is taking place, and they're taking, says in there, the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, and they're taking all these things and they're fleeing. And it says, and they write them on a nuek lech hosheth. That's my rough version of Hebrew for copper plate. And so here we have this story of these Levites, and Baruch is mentioned in this document as well, who is Jeremiah's scribe. We find Baruch all throughout the scriptures, and they're hiding these things. And uh, the scroll that Jim interpreted doesn't actually say the ark or those things on it. It does say that in the entrance there is another inventory. But when you read in the Treaty of the Vessels, you go a little further down, it starts talking about all these things in the ground, silver vessels, things like that. So those all match what Jim discovered. When you look at his research and you go over there, you're like, oh, that matches. And so potentially there's another copper scroll, an extension of the one he interpreted, maybe in the opening of the cave, that gives an inventory or list of the first paragraph, the menorah, and all these things. So now we have a story of these items coming out of Babylon during the Babylonian invasion for Jerusalem, being written on a copper plate by Baruch and Shamar Levi and some of them. Well, we find the same story in Second Maccabees, and in Second Maccabees we see that Jeremiah is taking the same items, and he was called to take them heading towards Mount Nebo. It says hither Mount Nebo, near Mount Nebo, not necessarily maybe in Mount Nebo, but somewhere near. And Qumran in the Valley of Achor is just across the Jordan from Mount Nebo and is on that path in that direction. And he speaks of the same things, and the Levites try to mark the way to the cave where he's hiding, and Jeremiah has to rebuke them for trying to mark the way. And he says these things will not be fine till the time of the gathering and the redemption and the time of mercy. And then he goes on to explain that when they come out, they will be used in a dedication, just like the tabernacle of Moses or the temple of Solomon. Those are only two times in history we saw the cloud and the fire come and dedicate a tabernacle and temple. Zerubbabel's, Herod's, none of those since then have had that dedication fire show up. But Jeremiah says when these come out, they'll be used again, and they're going to see that same event take place. So we know it's going to be a powerful event. Baruch, there's also pseudepigrapha writings, Baruch, and all of these stories are talking about the same story in Kings and Chronicles of the invasion of Babylon. So you can read these stories and they mirror what you're reading in the scripture. And in Baruch, it's fascinating because he's up on the hill and he's weeping and he's looking over Jerusalem, and God says, is this the Jerusalem that you weep over? He said, the Jerusalem that I protected, the one we call the apple of the eye, is the Jerusalem above. And he's reminding them that this Jerusalem is important, but the one coming is the one. And he sees the four angels descend on Jerusalem, but the boy says, "Stop, wait until we take these items out." And so in this story, we see them taking the temple items, the ark, and all that, and taking them out before the invasion is complete. And they take him, and Baruch says that the angel took him and said, "Put him in the earth and speak to the earth." And it says, "Oh, earth, 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 receive these things." And so that ties to what Jeremiah was doing when he was taking him into a hollow cave, and he was putting him in a hollow cave. So all these stories come together. Now, what's interesting about the Treaty of the Vessels is that published story that Rabbi Naftali Hertz put together actually matches a story found in Ezekiel's tomb. The Ezekiel tomb tablets are in Jerusalem, and we did a filming for a pilot for the History Channel, and uh, we had the museum held for the day, and the curator was there with us, and we got to see the marble tablets that were on Ezekiel's tomb. And the story goes that when you went into Ezekiel's tomb, there was these marble tablets, but they were smooth. But one day one fell off, and on the back was Hebrew writing. And it turns out as they took them off, it was the whole book of Ezekiel. And so the thought was a prophet is buried with his words to keep him accountable. Well, the two of those tablets at the very end told a different story. They actually tell the story of the Treaty of the Vessels that Rabbi Naphtali had published from those fragments in the Geniza. So Ezekiel, we know, was part of the Babylonian captivity, and somebody may have recorded that and stored it in Ezekiel's tomb and knew the story. And so when his marble tablets came off, they're confirming this story of Jeremiah and them fleeing, burying these things, and writing them on a copper plate. So that's really fascinating connection there. And so we put all these things together, and then we see in Jeremiah 3, when we start grounding it in the scriptures, that he talks about a time when the ark will be restored. Now, many people will misread that. And if I can do it off the top of my head, it talks about that when we were in exile, we didn't remember the ark, nor could we go up to it. Well, that makes sense. The ark is in a cave or it's buried somewhere. People are scattered throughout the nations. A lot of them have forgotten about the ark. They don't even follow the Torah or anything, much less go up and visit it. But it says in the days when the time of the gathering, they will no longer say those words. Well, why would they no longer say those words? Because they can now visit it and go up to the ark. And so the same prophet Jeremiah, who played the key role in hiding those things, tells us in the Bible that these things will be restored.
I love that. I love I love how God is proving or providing what was the term that you used? Like the Dead Sea Scrolls have proven that our Bible has come down through history intact. Now the tablets that have it written on the back and they fell off at just the right time, right, to prove the fragments.
Right,
It,
right.
it makes you wonder what
See,
else is. Give me just 1 second to. I'll hold up the Copper Scroll book while I do my sponsors, but I do have to stick my sponsors in here for just a minute, and we'll get back to it. Folks, if you have not been, pardon me, try to get that just right. If you have not been to Kilgore, Texas, to the Grand Empress Tea Room, I suggest that you go. If you're looking for a cozy escape, you'll find it right down in downtown Kilgore, where every bite is a taste of tradition, from delicious sandwiches and scones to the finest teas. We've got something for every craving. If you're planning a special event, our charming space is perfect for private parties, baby showers, and more. Treat yourself today at the Grand Empress Tea Room. I have had tea with Memory in her other tea house, and it was absolutely a wonderful experience. Another thing we have is Simply Clean Foods. And they are very militant about non-GMOs, and they help veterans through their food donations and provide food to victims of natural disasters. You can get the best food next to fresh from a farmer's market from them. Go to renalyn.com, find the affiliates page, and if you would click in from there, we'll get a small percentage to help keep this show on the air and help keep the books published. And the Copper Scroll Project you can find on amazon.com. It is a wonderful read. I actually got my copy. Chris handed it to me straight to my hand in Dallas, Texas at a Hear the Watchman conference, and it is a wonderful, wonderful documentary of what they have been doing. Now, Chris, I do have another question for you that I wrote down. If I can find where I wrote it here, give me just 1 second. Ah, I hate it when I do that. Since I can't find it, let me just ask you. the timing, you've talked about that. I just looked up a scripture that we talked about earlier about the river Euphrates, where the 4 angels are bound there, and God has a time specifically. It's the day, the hour. I mean, it's like down to the minute where these angels are bound there, and that's when they will be released. So I know a lot of people have different ideas of when this is all going to wrap up, and but I believe that God has it all timed down to the minute. So do you believe that the temple artifacts, the treasure, if you will, that Jim has located, do you think it will be found while we're still here? I know there's a lot of controversy over the rapture. Will it be when it all goes back into the third temple being built? Will that be when it comes?
Well, Jim's hope and mine is that these things will come out clearly in our lifetime because we've invested, especially Jim, who's invested more and his wife than anybody else in spreading the word and carrying the burden of this research. Want to be there when they come out, and we want them to come out during our time. We hope Israel, whoever ends up doing this will honor that and let us be a part of these things coming out of the ground. And we still wonder that. We personally could not tell you when they're going to come out. I mean, there's so many times where we thought we were right there. In fact, just recently we thought we were, things were about ready to go, and things just changed. And when I pray, Father says, just not time. And so I hope they come out in our time. At the same time, a lot of people in Israel don't want these things to come out. They don't want to deal with the Temple Mount. They're afraid it's going to, they're dealing with enough already. And, we were early on visiting a rabbi, a very key rabbi in the building of the temple. And Jim and I had left the research with him. Jim had left it, and we were coming back the next day, sitting outside waiting to go in. And I felt a real sadness over Israel, a heavy, heavy burden. And I turned to Jim and I said, I just feel like the people are lacking hope, that they need hope. I said, I don't know where this is coming from. And we just kind of talked about it. Anyway, we go in to sit with the rabbi, and he's excited about the research, and he leans over the desk and he gets up close to Jim's face, and he's almost with tears. He says, our people need hope. And we lack hope. Jim and I looked at each other because we were just outside, talking about this. So these things coming out will maybe get a lot of people off the fence. They've been riding the fence. It may scare a lot of other people. And when they come out, I don't know. I hope I'm here when they do. If not, at least they know where they're at, and they'll come out. When the Messiah gets here and he's ready to start doing this stuff. The Temple Institute is remade a lot of these things, but
I
I
was
mean,
going
why would
toward
God
that.
bring those out to use those? I've seen them all, and I just stand there and thinking, these aren't the ones that are going to go in the temple, unless they use them temporarily. But Father obviously hid those away, according to the prophet Jeremiah, to bring them out to be used again and dedicated.
Yes. Is it? I'm haven't looked this up recently, so I may get this a little bit wrong. But somewhere I'm wanting to say like around 2016, maybe a little earlier. Didn't they have a gathering in Jerusalem, and a geneticist was there and found like a marker on the sons of Aaron's on the men? So it seems like all of these things are coming together in this time. They built the Temple Institute. All of things are coming together. Does it indicate to you that we are in the time of the end where the Lord is coming back soon and evil will be wrapped up and we will live in that peace and that beautiful world that he created originally and go forth into eternity with him?
Yeah, we see a lot of the signs with the red heifer and everything. Jim and
Mhm.
I, especially Jim knows Byron, and we met Byron before they shipped him over to Israel. We went and got to see some of the red heifers, and you see all these major things coming together. I do know personally, what Father has shown me over the times is that we are in the beginning of the end, but not the end yet. And we definitely, in the last 10 years or so, have seen a lot of things taking place. to me that confirm that we're in the beginning of the end, but not the end yet. I've heard people say we're in the 7 year tribulation for 20 something years, and my gut just tells me we're not there yet. And there's,
Yeah.
people will say there's nothing that has to take place before this rapture comes, and I clearly disagree. Things that have to take place, things that still have to unfold
Mhm.
in the earth and there. But we're in the beginning of the end, and really, what I understand it is the next phase to me of Father's work is the gathering of the church. One of the things I really sense over the years is Father's wanting to deal with the divisional split of denominations in the church and bring down these denominational walls,
Amen. Amen.
bring unification in the body of Christ for the days ahead. And maybe stuff like this, if these come out, will start to bring forth some of that unification in the church.
I agree. In fact, when I teach, I've said the sentence many times. I think it's time for the denominations to fall because it has splintered so many things, and so many denominations, they've gotten one verse and they've written their whole theology on it. They throw out anything that doesn't support it. But I think
Mm-hmm.
right now we're seeing a real division of good and evil, and that people are deciding at a very core level who they're going to be, what they're going to follow, and what decisions they're making going forth. I think we are back in the Old Testament War of the Gods. And my choice is the God of the Bible, Jehovah, Jesus, Yeshua, however you want to say it. And Chris, I'm so grateful for your presence today and for everything that you've had to share. I really, really pray for you guys a lot. And I look at the
Thank
book
you.
on my bookshelf often and I think about it. And I'm like you. I hope it comes out because I think it will be something that will raise the bar of knowledge, and people who feel like it's all a fairy tale or it's all something for way back then, literally will have something solid that they have to look at and make a decision about. And I think it's all about that decision of who we're going to serve, right?
Amen. Yeah.
All right. We've got about 1 minute left. Do you have anything else?
No, no. Jim has a website, thetopscrollproject.com. You can go on there and find some stuff. We do have a YouTube channel. It's a lot of our older videos.
Mm,
We never really sought out to be a ministry, but we do recognize that we have an opportunity to bridge a gap of knowledge. And I think we kind of want to step into that in the future and help to just bring people along and educate the future of the temple. Scott Hillman has Acts Ministry School, where he's a great teacher on that. So I'm just excited to be on here, and thank you for taking the time to visit with us.
Thank you. Folks, we'll have Chris back again on another show later on where he will tell about his personal testimony and how he came from not knowing the Lord to knowing the Lord and allowing the Lord to use him in this endeavor. And this is it for Total Freedom Radio with Rena Lynn. And thank you, Chris. We'll see you later.
Thank you, Rena. Good night.